Good morning, Philip, and thanks for accepting this invitation. I have lots of questions for you. Let's start with Spring-Summer 2020. What were the main challenges, risks and difficulties with COVID-19?
Yeah, I think the first big challenge we had was to find a stable technical solution. We were using something that we had never tried before, something that we had to interconnect into our meeting rooms and we had to make function for the very first time. And so first we were able to find a solution that actually technically functioned. However, then the challenge was, how do we replicate that? Because one meeting is not what was needed. What was needed here was the ability to have 8-10 meetings in parallel and to be able to deliver 10-20 meetings per day with the same setup. Interpreters in the meeting room, remote participants joining in. And this scaling was really one of the major challenges we faced. And what we found was actually that in order for a meeting to be successful, we needed new skills to support the meeting. For instance, the end users, when they were connecting for the first time using the platform, we found that from time to time they had difficulty connecting, their microphone did not connect, their headset did not connect, they had problems being heard. So we saw that it was important to bring an IT type skill into the meeting room to contact remote users and help them connect. Similarly, we found that moderating what we call a hybrid meeting is different than moderating a normal meeting. You have the people in the room, but you also have to take care of a console where you can see who's connected remotely, who has raised their hand, who has the right to speak, who doesn't have the right to speak. And so we found that this skill or this profession of moderator was an additional skill that we needed in the meeting room. And so suddenly we had the meeting room secretariat, the people that are really organizing the meeting. We had the conference technician who's taking care of the installation in the room. Then we added an IT, we added a moderator. And so we saw that we needed somebody to glue it all together. And this was the coordinator. And so what we actually found was that in order to go from one meeting and actually scale it, the challenge was to find these people, to find these teams and to create these teams and to have these teams available. And that's been something that we've been working on consistently over the last months to find the people that have the skills, train those people and make sure that we do not leave the meeting on its own, but that we actually assist the interpreters, the secretariats in running their meetings.
Bearing in mind that the EP is different to the private market, what commercial options were considered that later proved unworkable at the EP and why? On the other hand, has the EP developed or requested any functionalities specific to its needs?
Well, we did look, before we started this, we did look at the major video conferencing platforms. But the major video conferencing platforms are all monolingual by design. Some of them have an interpretation add-on, right? They can supply interpretation, people can select languages, but it is an add-on. The core of the system is monolingual. And we saw that for our needs, right? We have 24 official languages. We needed to be able to stream up to 24 languages. We needed to be able to interconnect the system with the meeting room, having this exchange of 24 languages. We saw that these standard classical video conferencing platforms did not give us the flexibility or did not give us the scalability that we were looking for. And that's why we returned and we looked at really what is called the RSI platforms or the simultaneous interpretation delivery platforms, and we really looked there to find a solution for us to allow us to do the multilingual remote participation. And the platform we're working with really evolved with us. It really matured with us over these months. So we worked with them to improve some of the features. I mentioned the moderator with the moderator console. As we learned how to moderate meetings, the platform adapted the console. Similar for the interpreter console. We actually worked very closely with the interpreters and with the platform to kind of take their console and actually see whether we could adapt it, whether we could modify it, and whether we could make it more intuitive for interpreters who are used to work on hardware consoles, who have a certain reflex, who know that on this side I find my relay languages, I have my microphone button in the middle, it turns a certain color when I press it, I have my A and my B language, and to make sure that when they use a soft console, they don't feel like it's something completely different, that we try to make it more the same. We've worked on audio settings, and I think we'll talk a lot more about that in a while. But we've also looked at how do we integrate remote interpretation with the meeting room. So we have our meeting rooms, we have our hardware consoles, But for us as Parliament, what is really important is that ability to say, I have my hardware infrastructure, I would like to extend it with software consoles. How do I make those two systems communicate and integrate? And so basically what we've seen is that the platform has worked with us as we came across those different challenges, I would say, or we came upon new requirements to actually evolve as our needs evolved over those months.
How was RSI adapted to the EP's needs? For example, hubs, connected rooms, mobile booths, Strasbourg Bridge, and remote from home.
Yeah. One of the main challenges of the COVID pandemic was that we fell back to one interpreter per booth, which basically means that when you run the plenary session and normally you have 24 languages, the one interpreter per booth rule means that we go to 8 languages maximum for the plenary. And this is not sustainable, as plenary is multilingual by nature. We need to make sure that our members can be heard by all of the citizens in Europe in the language of their choice. So it was really critical that we found a way to, what we would call now, to increase our booth capacity, to have more booths available in those meeting rooms where meetings were taking place. And we really went through a whole different list of options there. The first thing we looked at is, well, can we couple a meeting room which is not being used, or can we take the booths of a meeting room that is not being used, and can we take those booths and connect them to a meeting room where the meeting is taking place? And the extreme to what we went is, we once, during this period, we actually used the plenary session, and we connected 142 booths to the plenary session. Why? Because we needed to do a seamless changeover of interpreter teams. And so basically we needed to have 2 booths for each interpreter, 3 interpreters per language, which means 6 booths per language, except for Gaelic where we only need 4 booths. That's another story. But so we needed, and we ended up with by connecting 142 booths into our plenary in order to allow for this changeover. That was one option we looked at. The second option we looked at was mobile booths. Mobile booths, we started with the installation of mobile booths in meeting rooms. We found meeting rooms where, at the back of the meeting room, there were no visitors. We could replace visitor seats by mobile booths. And that way we found a way to increase the languages we were offering in those rooms. And then we looked at spaces near the meeting rooms, spaces where at the moment nobody is visiting anyway. We looked at what are called the exhibition areas in the Parliament, and we transformed 3 of those by installing mobile booths. At the moment, we have over 140 mobile booths installed in the offices of the Parliament in Brussels to allow us to increase our capacity in languages which are being offered. And then we went one step further. We said, well, we've looked at Brussels, we've looked at meeting room coupling, mobile booths, but we have Strasbourg. In Strasbourg, we have a seat which was not being used, and where we have meeting room infrastructure, and we looked at the possibilities to interconnect booths for meeting rooms in Strasbourg with Brussels. In a mixed way, meaning that part of the team was sitting in Brussels, part of the team was sitting in Strasbourg, which actually means that when an interpreter is working in Strasbourg and they have a B language, right, or retour language, into a language which is working in Brussels, they could actually take over. There was an interconnection between the two, and we did that as well. So we looked at all possible ways we had to work with mobile and fixed booths, working on hardware consoles, and then even with that, we came to a point where we were still looking to increase our capabilities, and then we looked at RSI. We looked at the remote simultaneous interpretation, where we currently have people which are working from home, which what we call NC-RSI, non-collocated RSI, and we have people working from hubs on a regular basis. And today, we can proudly say that we've reached 70% of our pre-COVID interpretation capacity. It's been a long journey. I think the first meeting we had 4 languages. 1 meeting in a day, and at the moment we are running regularly between 20 and 30 meetings a day, spread over 12 meeting rooms to offer services which are close or comparable to the services we were offering to our clients before the pandemic started.
How did the system deal with the practicalities of expanding to other languages? What would be your preferred remote setup?
Yes, well, we try to apply what we call cascade principle. So from a practical perspective, we try to privilege, whenever possible, the use of fixed booths over mobile booths. Because of course the sound installation is better, the space is better, the equipment is installed in a more professional way. So fixed booths before mobile booths. Then in the second step, we privilege the use of hardware consoles over software consoles. So from a practical perspective, we do try to follow both of those rules to actually help us get to achieve, let's say, the best quality working environment for the interpreters and therefore the best quality interpretation for our clients. Well, when we look at the remote setup, well, for us, the preferred setup when it comes to remote is a hybrid setup. We have booths which are available in the meeting rooms, and so we see that for us, in order for RSI or for remote interpretation to be effective, it needs to be used as a complement in the meeting room. And so if we look at what my preferred remote setup is a setup where we actually have hybrid, we use the capabilities we have on site in the meeting rooms first. And once we've come to the limit of those capabilities, we actually add RSI in hubs or working from home as a complement. So the collaboration of the hardware console and the software console for us was really critical in order to allow for the usage of RSI.
As we become aware of the financial and environmental costs of travelling, do you support using all available technologies to reduce those costs? Could you tell us something about the extra cost of running all these various meetings, such as the platform itself, extra manpower and technical installations?
Well, I think that if we look at the impact of climate change today on our environment, I think it is important that we look at all options to reduce our environmental impact. However, it's a balance. It's a balance of climate on the one hand, but it's also a balance of what are the needs of, on the one hand, our users, but what are the needs of our interpreters. It is important that we're able to deliver a quality service. It's important that we take into account well-being, job satisfaction. So those elements are critical. So it's not a black or white answer. Right? When it comes to cost, we've really looked at three elements. The first one is we have brought forward some significant investments in our technical infrastructure. Things that were planned next year or the year after, we actually brought them forward because we needed better quality image or better quality sound or newer consoles in order to allow us to complete some interconnections. So we brought that forward. Secondly, yes, the platform has a cost. And a remote simultaneous interpretation platform has a different cost than a classical video conferencing platform. But for us, at the moment, I would say the element which conditions most our ability to deliver additional meetings, other than, of course, the interpretation capacity itself, right? The interpretation is the resources, the human resources needed actually to be able to deliver a multilingual remote participation meeting. And those resources are, as I said earlier, coordinators, moderators, the IT specialists, all of those staff have a significant impact on the running of a meeting and on the total cost of the overall cost of a meeting. Yes.
Do you think that one day we might only interpret from home?
Well, the easy answer is no, I don't think so. I think that if you look at today professions in general, there are multiple professions in the world where in theory people could work from home all the time. And it's not taking place, So I do not understand why for interpretation that would be an exception. So for me, no, I don't think that that's the only mode of working.
What technical improvements have there been since March 2020, such as stability of image and sound, connections and ease of use?
Well, in the beginning, it was really about making the connection stable. So we started with a technical solution, which worked, but the first challenge was how do we get the connection of the remote participants when they're in the room stable? Then the second challenge was how do we make connections of remote participants easier? How do we allow them for certain platforms that might not connect in the beginning, connect afterwards, and to go really in that. So the beginning was focusing on the participant. How do we make sure that we get the participant connected? How do we make sure that when the participant is connected, it is stable? Then our biggest change actually was to the revamp of the remote simultaneous interpretation console, the soft console as we call it, which really went from a soft console, I would say, which was more based on how the platform side developed to a console which I think today is more based on how the interpreter would have liked it developed. So if I would say those were really started with the participant, and then as we came closer to the use of the soft console, we actually focused on that area and got the soft console revamped.
We all recognise the importance of good sound. What has been done to improve it, and what remains to be done?
Yeah, I think this is probably the biggest challenge. I think that what was really important at the Parliament is that we worked in close relationship with the interpreters. In the beginning we received feedback, and at a certain point in time we decided to create what we now call the technical working group, where representatives of the interpreters work with myself and people from the technical part of our organization to see how we can improve sound and what is key when we look at improving sound together. And then we kind of decomposed the audio chain. We looked at, okay, what are the components that make up the sound from the remote participants into the room? And we really found 3 components. In the middle you have the platform. The platform is connected into the meeting room, and then you have the remote participant. And I put them in that order because it's also the order in which we attack the problem. The first one, we looked at the platform, and we worked together with the platform provider and with the interpreters to see what are the best settings. Okay, there are some natural tendencies to say noise suppression is good, automatic gain control is good, echo cancellation is good, and bandwidth, well, we have to see what we can deliver in terms of audio bandwidth. But we really worked with interpreters to say, okay, we tested 32, 64, 96, 128, we went higher into the bandwidth dedicated for audio, and we came to a compromise. Okay, this is the bandwidth that works for us. We looked at the audio correction settings, and we decided which ones worked and which ones we didn't want, and to my surprise, noise suppression was removed because it was felt that noise suppression altered the audio signal too much for interpreters. So really this collaboration was really, really important. So that was one. Why the platform first? Because the platform impacts every meeting, right? Once we get the platform right, it has a positive effect on every meeting that we were doing with remote participation. Then we looked at the interconnection of the platform into the meeting room. Why? Because meeting rooms are used for multiple meetings a day. Right. And so we looked at how can we adapt our audio settings in the meeting rooms so that we equalize in the best possible way so that the sound is the most agreeable to the interpreters, right, in the meeting room. And then the final step is to say, how can we improve the sound coming from the remote participants? In our case, we have over 700 members or delegates that connect on a regular basis into these meetings. So what can we do to improve the sound quality coming from the remote participants? And there, the first thing we did was actually, on suggestion of the interpreter, say, let's choose microphones which are the most agreeable or which give the best performance. And together we selected a tabletop, a lapel, and a headset microphone, which we felt, and which the interpreters felt, gave the best audio conditions. And what we're doing at this point in time is pushing or finding ways to roll out this equipment to our members, to, let's say, encourage our members to actually ask for the equipment, to provide it to them, and to help them even in setting up and using it.
Communication with speakers is paramount. How can we convince them to use the right equipment and make them aware of how difficult it is to interpret if they ignore the recommendations, such as connecting when on the move or relying on computer audio?
Well, actually, from the very beginning, we noticed that it was really important to inform the remote participants on the requirements to have a good quality remote intervention. And we created something what we call the speaker guidelines, which we actually distributed very actively to all remote participants, whether they were delegates, members of the Parliament, or whether they were external guests speaking as experts in committee meetings. We distributed them by putting them on the website of the Parliament. We distributed them actually as attachments to meeting invites so that they were repeated and reiterated regularly. However, over time we also saw that it was important to give these, to endorse them further. And so we actually had the questors, which is one of the governing bodies of the parliaments, made up of members of parliaments, who actually endorsed the guidelines in order to reinforce the communication to the members to say this is really important in order to obtain a good quality intervention and therefore a good quality interpretation. But this also gives some legitimacy to interpreters to actually be able to say, well, under these particular conditions, interpretation is not possible. And I'm specifically thinking about remote participants intervening from a moving car, intervening from a train, And so there we felt that it was important that interpreters had the possibility to say, look, it's clearly written there that this is not something that allows us to provide quality interpretation, and therefore under these circumstances we would have to stop providing interpretation. But of course, that's not the objective. The objective is to have good quality interventions. And here we found that it is important to propose and to define the solutions and bring the solutions to the end users, to our delegates. As I said earlier, we worked on certain microphones. We identified 3 types. And what we're really actively working out now is to reaching out to the members to actually deliver that equipment, but also help them install the equipment, use the equipment, and show to them the difference between an intervention which is done on good quality equipment and an intervention which is done on lesser quality equipment, and to show that to them that it serves everybody. It serves the interpreter, it serves the other user listening to the meeting, and it serves their image going out to the world on web streaming. And that's really the main activity that we're working on today, is to work with our end users to help them and to provide them with the solutions that allow them to have quality interventions.
We must work closely with the technicians, as well as moderators, coordinators and secretariats. How can we convince them of the need to intervene to ensure our sound is of the quality required for interpreting?
Yeah, there we have there's 2 aspects. First is that there's the aspect of the technical installations which are part of the conference room, and the fact that the technicians and the technical staff control that, configure it, and monitor it throughout the meeting. So we have one component that we control, which is under our control. The second component is the remote participants. How throughout the meeting do we try to achieve the best possible quality of our remote participants? One thing that we systematically offer is testing of remote users prior to the meeting. So already the day before, there's a dedicated test room where committee secretariats can book slots and say, we have a remote speaker coming in, they've never used the platform, we would like to test them on the platform, and they can test the day prior. We start our meetings typically, and we start configuring meetings typically an hour before the start. And whenever remote participants start connecting 30 minutes before, we do test them. We see whether sound and image are good. And we do try to motivate them to have the right type of microphone. For a while it was easy, because we said use a headset. Now with the tabletop microphones and the lapel microphones, it's a little bit more difficult, but it's really, we do work to stimulate the remote participants to have the right quality there. Once you get into the meeting, it's the chair who will decide whether a meeting can be interrupted and who can make a remark. So during an intervention, it's the chair that will decide to let the intervention go or the intervention stop. However, once the intervention is done, and if we know that there's a second intervention during the same meeting by the same person, our IT specialists are there to actually call the remote participants and try to reach them and have a discussion with them, see what can be done to improve. And actually during the last Strasbourg week, we actually had our technical staff going to the meeting room and actually, going not to the meeting room, going to the office of the remote participant and actually provide them with a better quality microphone while the meeting was ongoing. So that in the first intervention it was lower quality, and then in the second intervention we were able to achieve a better quality. So that, and then finally, of course, it's the monitoring of meetings, seeing whether people are whether we have people that are intervening systematically with lower quality, and that we then can reach out to those people and work with them and see how we can help them improve. And for that we have team leader reports where we get that information. We have our coordinators that are there. At the moment we're really in this deployment phase of the equipment. So we know which microphones we want to be used, we're deploying them, but we're seeing that we're getting to a stage where we can say, okay, some people are improving, others are not, so how do we focus on the ones that are not improving?
The EP has made great progress and is now the RSI reference for other international institutions. It is considered the best and fastest in adapting and finding solutions. Do you agree with this assessment?
I really like that question. So it's basically, I was looking for an analogy in my head while you were asking it, and I think that the best way is to say it's like asking a father whether his baby is the cutest. And of course my baby is the cutest baby of all, right? Definitely. But no, I have to say that I'm very, very proud, because a lot of very hard work has gone into this, to find the solutions and to offer the interpretation. And it's been a challenge, but the team and the support has really been outstanding.
Where does RSI go next in the EP? Could you tell us about this June plenary 2021? Why was it so special? What were the challenges and how did it go?
Well, the June's plenary was special because we returned to Strasbourg after a year, or more than a year, of sessions that took place in Brussels. And as I mentioned earlier, we really went through a whole process to increase the capacity of interpretation, of provision of interpretation in Brussels, through installation of mobile booths, coupling of rooms. This same process had not taken place in Strasbourg. So in order for us to be able to deliver the same number of languages, to deliver the same interpretation in meetings in Strasbourg, the only way to do that was actually to find a way to have interpreters deliver interpretation from Brussels in the booths to Strasbourg. We did so for the plenary, and we did so for about 8 other meetings in parallel at the same time, group meetings that were taking place in Strasbourg. And at the peak moment, we actually had a total of 100 languages being delivered, interpreted in Brussels and delivered into Strasbourg. So how did it go? I think that the users were quite happy. But I know that when it comes to the technical setup, we have some fine-tuning to do in the way we bring the audio and the video from Strasbourg to Brussels with the highest quality. And this is something that we will continue working on as long as we would have to work in this mode.
On a more personal note, what has been your own experience of this process?
Yeah, it has been very intense. Whenever we have this type of discussion with the team, the answer I get from the team is that we have the feeling that we moved mountains every week. That we do in a week or in 2 weeks what we used to do in 6 months or a year, because there's this pressure. This is only possible because there's also a tolerance of failure, which is really create an environment where we're not afraid to try things, because if we don't try, it will not work, right? We have this, especially in the beginning, it was we didn't have a solution and we were looking for a solution. And it is accepted that things might not be perfect in the beginning. What is important is that there is continuous improvement. And I think this is also something we've learned working with the interpreters, that it is very important to create an environment where there is a constant exchange, and that we learn every time what works well, that we get from feedback what is not working, and that we try to find ways to improve systematically what we're doing. But on the other hand, it's been very rewarding. I think it's, for me personally, I will talk about this period to my grandchildren, saying that it was probably the most exciting and the most important moment of my professional career. So from that perspective, yes, I think it is something that I will remember. The question is joyfully or not, right? But that I will remember for the years to come.
Do you think this technological revolution in interpreting will bring bigger changes in the future for interpreters than we have seen in the past year?
So, no, I don't think that we have bigger changes ahead of us. I think we've really seen the biggest transformation. The question is now where will the balance be? And how can we stabilize what we're working with today? We've asked a lot from people, right? We've asked a lot from interpreters. The discussions around simultaneous interpretation delivery platforms are also about quality, connection of end users, audio quality. So one key question there is, how can we continue to improve this? How can we stabilize this? And then it becomes about finding the balance and what this technological change or revolution will turn into in the new normal.
Have interpreters made this process more complicated or slower, or have they helped with reshaping the whole system?
Well, interpreters in this process were one of the key stakeholders. And therefore it was really important to work closely with them and to address their concerns. And what I found is that when you do that, everything becomes better. It goes from the setup from the mobile booths, where technicians will think this is fine, right? But it's only when you consult the person that is really working in the mobile booth that you'll optimize the setup. And I'll give a very basic example. We decided to add plants in one of the areas where mobile booths were installed because interpreters felt that that was more soothing or made it feel more open to come there, and people felt less mechanical, if I may say that, right? So yes, that was really important. The other element is the audio settings, right? When I look at the technical aspects, you have certain things where you say this is the way it should be, but in the end, the interpreter is the client. So you want to listen to your client in order to be able to find the right balance in the setup. And we felt that when you do that, you get to the better result.
Everybody is talking about the new normal. How do you see the new normal in interpretation in the near future?
So this question, I'm going to answer it with my head of director for conference organization. When we look at it from a conference organization perspective, if hybrid meetings are here to stay, there will be meetings that will have a remote participation component. It will not be every meeting, but we see that the possibilities that hybrid or remote participation offers in terms of bringing experts into debates without having to travel over longer distances is definitely something that will be continued to be used. I do believe that the physical meeting of people is very important. You see that Parliament, when we see meetings that are taking place, often what is done in the meeting is just as important as what takes place out of the meeting. So bringing people physically together will always be there. But the ability to have access to people that otherwise would be inaccessible is something we will continue to generate the need for hybrid meetings. I also believe that the quality of the participation will improve. Internet will get better. 5G, for instance, right? If we think about that, there will be quantum leap improvements in the quality of audio and video. But I also think that end users are becoming more and more aware of the importance of good quality audio and video. Everybody, or lots of people, are today stuck in Zoom meetings from the morning to the evening. I have personally moved away from having a headset, but we're using a tabletop microphone and listening to a speaker because it was just more, and you can feel that people are getting into a mode that they're becoming aware. There's awareness, and with awareness, quality will improve.
Thank you very much, Philip. It's been a pleasure. Good luck, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much, Lou. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. It was my pleasure as well. And maybe see each other again in the future for another one.
Yes. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.